Samantha had always loved old things. There was something about the weight of history, the echo of past lives, that drew her in. When she found the antique shop hidden away at the end of a narrow, cobblestone alley, she felt a thrill of discovery. The sign above the door, faded and barely legible, read Curiosities and Oddities. Inside, the air was thick with dust and age. Shelves were crammed with items that seemed to whisper stories of long-forgotten times. It was there, in the dim light of the shop, that Samantha first saw the mirror. It was tall and narrow, framed in dark, intricately carved wood. The glass was cloudy with age, its surface warped in a way that made her reflection seem strange and distorted. But something about it captivated her. She felt a pull, an inexplicable urge to have it. The shopkeeper, an old man with a hunched back and eyes that seemed to see too much, watched her as she approached the mirror. "Ah, the mirror," he said in a voice like dry leaves rustling. "Many have been drawn to it, but few have taken it home. Why not?" Samantha asked, tracing her fingers along the wooden frame. It was cool to the touch, almost unnaturally so. "It's peculiar," the old man said slowly. "Some say it plays tricks on the mind." Samantha laughed. "I love a good mystery. How much?" The old man hesitated, then named a price that seemed surprisingly low. Samantha paid him and arranged for the mirror to be delivered to her apartment. As she left the shop, the old man watched her with a look that was somewhere between pity and fear. The mirror arrived the next day. It looked even older in the bright light of her apartment, its surface dull and lifeless. Samantha set it against the wall in her living room, admiring the way it seemed to dominate the space. She couldn't wait to see what it looked like at night, when the shadows would play across the glass. That evening, after dinner, she poured herself a glass of wine and sat in front of the mirror. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows. She stared at her reflection, noting how the warped glass made her features look strange and unfamiliar. There was something almost hypnotic about it. As she watched, she felt a creeping unease, as if her reflection was watching her just as intently. She shook her head, laughing at herself. "It's just a mirror," she muttered, taking a sip of wine. But as the evening wore on, she found herself glancing at it more and more often. Each time, her reflection seemed to shift slightly, as if it were subtly different from one moment to the next. She began to feel a prickling at the back of her neck, a sense that she was being watched. She turned away from the mirror, trying to shake off the feeling, but it lingered, gnawing at her. That night, as she lay in bed, she dreamt of the mirror. In her dream, she stood before it, staring into its depths. Her reflection smiled, but she did not. It was a cold, cruel smile, one that sent a shiver down her spine. She tried to turn away, but her feet were rooted to the spot. Her reflection reached out, pressing its hands against the glass. For a moment, it looked as though it might break through. She woke with a start, her heart pounding. The room was dark and silent. She glanced toward the living room, half expecting to see her reflection standing there, watching her. But there was nothing, just shadows. Over the next few days, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. She would catch glimpses of movement in the mirror out of the corner of her eye, but when she turned to look, there was nothing there. Her reflection seemed to stare back at her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. One night, as she was brushing her teeth, she noticed something strange. Her reflection wasn't copying her movements exactly. There was a slight delay, a lag, as if it were thinking about what to do next. She froze, her toothbrush halfway to her mouth. Her reflection did not. Smiled. She dropped the toothbrush and backed away, her heart racing. "This isn't real," she whispered. "It's just my imagination." But as she stood there, staring into the mirror, her reflection slowly raised its hand and pressed it against the glass. Samantha's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to run, to smash the mirror and be done with it, but something held her in place. The reflection leaned forward, its eyes locking onto hers. Its smile widened, revealing sharp, gleaming teeth. It mouthed words she couldn't hear, but she knew, deep down, that it was trying to tell her something terrible. Then, with a sudden, jerky movement, the reflection turned and walked away, disappearing out of sight. But Samantha hadn't moved. She was still standing in front of the mirror, her body frozen in place. Her mind reeled. How could this be happening? She reached out, hesitantly touching the glass. It was cold, impossibly cold. She felt a pull, a tugging sensation, as if the mirror were trying to draw her in. Over the following nights, the reflection appeared more frequently, each time with a more sinister expression. It would stare at her, unblinking, as she went about her evening routine. Sometimes it would smile that cold, cruel smile. Other times, it would tilt its head, as if listening to something only it could hear. Samantha started to lose sleep. She became jumpy and paranoid, feeling the reflection's eyes on her even when she wasn't looking. She tried covering the mirror, but every time she did, she would wake up to find the cloth removed, neatly folded at the base of the mirror. The reflection wanted to be seen. One night, unable to bear it any longer, she grabbed a hammer and approached the mirror. Her reflection watched her, its eyes narrowing. She hesitated, raising the hammer, but before she could strike, her reflection moved. It pressed its hands against the glass and mouthed a single word, "Wait." Samantha froze, her hand trembling. The reflection leaned closer, its face filling the mirror. It mouthed another word, slowly, deliberately, "Help!" Confusion and fear twisted inside her. "What are you?" she whispered. The reflection mouthed one last word, "Trapped." Before she could react, the reflection raised its hand and slammed it against the glass. The mirror shattered, pieces of it flying everywhere. Samantha stumbled back, dropping the hammer. For a moment, the room was filled with a deafening silence. Then she felt it, a cold, clammy hand on her shoulder. She turned slowly, her heart pounding. There was no one there. The next morning, she found herself standing in front of the mirror. The glass was whole, without a single crack. She blinked, staring at her reflection. It stared back, perfectly mirroring her movements. She felt a wave of relief. Maybe it had all been a dream. But as she turned away, she caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye. Her reflection wasn't turning with her. It was watching her, a knowing smile spreading across its face. Panic gripped her. She spun back to face the mirror, but her reflection was gone. Instead, she saw herself, only it wasn't her. It was someone else, trapped inside the glass, banging on the surface with frantic desperation. She reached out, but her hand hit the cold, unyielding glass. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She was on the wrong side. She was the reflection now. As she watched, the other version of herself, the one on the outside, smiled. It turned away from the mirror and walked out of the room, leaving her alone, trapped in the silent, dark world behind the glass. And that's where she remains, waiting for someone to come close enough to see her, to notice her, to let her out.